happening. Oh. Nope, no frames dropped. We're good. Okay, here we go. This is it. It begins in 3, 2, 1.
I have
No, wait. I gotta play this first. Okay, 3, 2, 1.
For more than a year, ominous rumors had been privately circulating among high-level Western leaders that the Soviet Union had been at work on what was darkly hinted to be the ultimate weapon, a doomsday device.
I have
CurrentGeek!
Aha.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to CurrentGeek. It's the film festival. Oh my gosh, Galvin McLeod, he's back. I can feel him.
Found him. Found the box he was in. He's back.
He was okay. Everything was fine.
He's fine.
Okay.
Never been better.
Good. Not all scarred up or banged up or anything. From
No, he's looking good.
All right. Well,
Rested, tanned, rested, and ready.
You know, the longer you let something carved out of wood rest, the better it sounds. That's my understanding. There it goes, back in its resting place. Welcome back, everybody, to the show. This is our film festival, a monthly look at the greatest movies or films or movies of all time. But we try to do it from a geeky perspective. I'm Scott Johnson. That's Tom Merritt. Hi, Tom.
Movies are so much better than Milne.
Oh man, aren't you're not wrong about any of this. This is all true. So we come to you today with yet another film on the list that I haven't seen, but Tom has. Well, now I've seen it. I mean, I've seen it now, but I hadn't seen it before now. And I should make a quick correction. I told you, I don't know, a couple of weeks running that Dr. Strangelove was my mom's favorite movie.
Right.
I screwed up.
Is this not true?
I checked in with her. I screwed up. It's not this. And it makes perfect sense now that it isn't this after seeing it, because it's way too weird for my mom.
It was a very interesting perspective on your mom when I believed this was her favorite movie.
Yeah.
But what was the confusion?
The confusion was, just as I suspected, it was Dr. Zhivago.
Oh, okay. Another great movie.
Yes, another doctor referenced.
But a romance, so kind of fits more, I think.
Yeah, and I don't want to be, I'm not trying to be stereotypic here, but my mom kind of goes down that line of, you know, that would be her kind of movie, and this would have been something that when it was on, she would have been in her 20s, I guess, and she would have thought, what the crap is this, and probably hasn't even seen it. So, yes, Zhivago, not
I thought you were going to say
Strangelove.
Doctor Strange was her favorite movie.
That would even be cooler. But and she did like Doctor Strange, for the record. However, her favorite movie is Zhivago, not this guy. So
yeah,
it
and
is.
Doc Medpod points out both Dr. Zhivago and Dr. Strangelove have Russians.
Yeah, big Russian influence in both movies,
So
right?
hence the confusion.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I maybe that's where I got it confused, because I knew
And
there was
doctors.
something to do with it. Sure. And they're also, but one's black. This is black and white, and I'm pretty sure Zhivago is not black and white.
No, it is color. Yeah.
Okay. Because there were a couple of moments in this movie where I forgot I was watching a black and white movie. And my recollection, for example, of the scene in the hotel or apartment or whatever it was, where George C. Scott's hanging out with his girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
I saw that in color for some reason in my head. So
Interesting.
black and white movies are like this for me generally, dude. It's like,
So black and white movies can be in color.
only in my brain though. Like they're
In
not
your brain.
Yeah.
You know, I actually had that experience when I was a kid. We would always watch the St. Louis Cardinals football team on Sundays, and we had a color television. But one week, for what I don't know why, I was watching the football game in my room on a black and white TV. My parents let me have a black and white TV in my room. And I don't know why I wasn't watching it in the other room. Maybe I was just like, I'm going to be in my room today. But I remember thinking I could see the red on the Cardinal football helmets, even on the black and white TV.
See, it's a weird thing, right? Like I have a few memories like that, and you're not wrong.
Well, you've got Turner colorized memories.
Yeah, no, maybe that's part of it, because I have seen. In fact, recently I went down this dirty old rabbit hole for Oliver Hardy and Stan Laurel stuff, or Stan Hardy. Whatever
there's
their
a
names
movie
are.
coming out about
Yeah,
that.
and that's what spawned it. I saw the trailer and went, "Oh, I should go and just watch some old stuff." And it turns out Amazon Prime has tons of this, like old vintage shorts from those guys, and a bunch of it's colorized, and it's super weird to see that colorized. So I kind of have this weird problem. I also think I've never dreamed in black and white. Everyone says you do, but I think I remember color all the time. So just want to get that out of the way.
I always think my dreams were in color too. So yeah.
So I don't know what that means, and I don't know the real science of it. But for whatever reason, black and white. I mean, once I get past the initial, oh, this is in black and white, then I'm just in. And the only movie that really tears me out of it would be like Schindler's List, which we've seen previously on the show, where the girl in the red coat shows up, and then you're reminded, oh, right, I'm not watching a full color feature. I'm watching something in black and white. And I think that's interesting. It probably speaks to the quality of these things. They're good enough that I forget that I'm watching something that's meant to look old. Because you got to think this aesthetic is only a thing because this is all we had at one point, and there were
Modern Times was
black
color,
and white, wasn't it?
See, I'm remembering it in color right now.
That's weird. Hold on, now that you say it, oh my gosh, was it in? It had to be in black and white, right? It had to. It's the first silent or first talkie movie that wasn't a silent movie. It had to be black and white.
No, Modern Times was not the first talkie.
Not the first talkie, but it was like the first. It was his first attempt at something like that.
It was 1936, so there were color movies.
Modern Times. Now I have to look it up.
It was just expensive.
Okay, it's black and white. Phew.
Yeah, no, you were right.
I thought I was going crazy because I see there's a bunch of scenes in that, like the clockwork space where the dude had to always pull levers and do what he was told from the big video screen.
Yeah.
I picture that in color, all of that.
Same here. That's why I was having trouble remembering that it was black and white. So weird.
Well, see.
Well, and Dr. Strangelove was black and white, not because it had to be. I mean, it came out in 1964, January 1960, it was shot in 1963. Color was the de rigueur by that point. But I think it was more at that point, not a cost-saving thing. Sometimes things were shot in black and white to save cost, but I think it was shot in black and white for effect. It's one of the earliest choices. Well, I guess Wizard of Oz was a choice to shoot in black and white for effect, but I think Kubrick wanted to have the feeling of news.
Yeah, I think he
newsreel kind of feel.
I think he accomplished that. I mean, it definitely kind of had that, but also my experience with Stanley Kubrick is limited to kind of The Shining forward. Even 2001 was a little bit beyond my scope. I've seen it since, and I think it's pretty amazing, but was not really a thing I'd seen. So Stanley Kubrick to me is the guy who made The Shining, the guy who made Full Metal Jacket, those kinds of movies. His later career stuff. And
he was 36 when he made Dr. Strangelove. I mean, this was far down into his career. Not far down, but this was not the beginning. This was his Peter Sellers years, they're often called, because he did so many collaborations during this period with him.
Yeah, and Peter Sellers, there's another funny thing about this movie. To me, he's just Pink Panther, and that's it. Like, I know that he's got a whole other side of his career that everybody admires and talks about, and there's other movies, certainly. But for me growing up, Peter Sellers was Inspector Clouseau, and it was those Pink Panther movies, and that was it. That's all I knew of that guy.
Yeah.
So to watch this was like, oh, right. He did other stuff. It wasn't all just this bumbling French detective. There was like this other brilliant side of stuff he would do.
And he was actually supposed to play the Texan that flew the plane.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's Slim Pickens.
Yeah.
Slim Pickens.
Slim Pickens was not originally cast, but and Sellers worked on a passable Texas accent, but it was just too much. It was too much work, and so they ended up switching to Slim Pickens, which happy accident. I think it's Major T.J. Kong, King Kong. I think having him added to the film. I think having Sellers in another role was already kind of distracting having him in 3 roles. In fact, I wonder if having someone else as the president would have made any difference. In other words, if you had Slim Pickens the president, not have Sellers be the president, because he's so not Sellers as the president. But it was kind of a thing. I mean, Kubrick is moving from his Hollywood successes into his experimental phase, into his groundbreaking phase. And so he wanted Sellers to play multiple parts because he thought that would be interesting. That would be cool, and Sellers was capable of it.
Yeah, maybe more than anyone else in his peer group at the time. Like, he was a savant in some ways. He would disappear into these characters, and I knew. See, for example, I knew he was the Strangelove, guy who.
Oh, Sellers was injured in the cockpit, and that's why it was too much work for him. I should add that. It wasn't just that he was tired; he got injured.
But he could have been your fourth. Oh, that would have been nuts. But anyway, so like the dark glasses, glove wearing Dr. Strangelove guy, and then the English officer guy. Those were like immediately I went, oh, there's Peter Sellers. I forgot he was the president for a good while.
No, that's what I mean. Like, I wonder if having a different actor would have brought something else out of the president. Although, frankly, he did a fantastic job as President Muffley.
Yeah, he really did. I mean, it's not a very likable character though. I remember, or I felt while watching it like he wasn't my favorite person in the world. So I guess
he's modeled on Adlai Stevenson.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's probably not a bad thing, I guess.
And Adlai Stevenson was not popular enough to ever win the presidency. So
no, he was vice president to
you
Nixon.
You could blame Estes Kefauver, his running mate, for that, but it's up to you.
Yeah, depending on how you look at it. Anyway, I just think it's a very interesting, different kind of thing than I expected of Stanley Kubrick. So I'm looking for all his signature stuff, his kind of quiet, still camera, slow pan stuff. It's not as it's not here as much as it would be in his later work.
If anybody has it, well, I guess Strangelove has it a little bit. Group Captain Mandrake has the most Sellers characteristics to me of the three.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. But it's just a very odd thing. I'm going to say this may be the weirdest thing we watched in our series so far. And part of it is I couldn't tell how much of this is supposed to be full-blown farce, how much of it is supposed to be serious commentary on Cold War era ideas, and how much of it is supposed to be dystopic nonsense, almost like Brazil. It felt like Brazil or one of those movies, like just weird and out there, and everybody's behaving in a way that's just slightly off. I thought George C. Scott's character was completely nuts. Not quite as nuts as the other guy. And the
legend has it that the way they got George C. Scott to do that character that way was to tell him to overdo it as a safety take to get him ready for the real take, but then use that overdoing it take in the movie.
Oh, that's crazy to hear that.
Ham it up, George, just so to get it out of your system. We won't film, and then we'll do the real take, but they'd film it.
Yeah. And he is very young here. Like, not that, everyone's young at some point, I suppose, but I was surprised.
He's also dead.
Yeah, he's not alive anymore. Like, I wish he was. Here's a shot of him, chat room, just doing his thing in this movie. He is so into it. Like, look at him, just arms out, eyes bulging, being Mr. General nutcase, wants to blow everything up. And I was impressed, because my only real George C. Scott experience is
Turgidson,
that's his
General
name. Yeah,
Turgidson.
Yeah. And his thing with his girlfriend never got resolved. Like, I couldn't figure all that stuff out.
Well, okay, so from what I read, and again, as we say all the time, we're not trying to be film experts here. You all know way more than us about this. Is just our geeky opinion on this movie.
Right.
But from what I have read, the idea originally was to make a movie based on the novel Red Alert by Peter George. That would have been serious about what would happen if the system broke down and we were brought to the brink of war. And how would that get resolved and what would happen? But there was another movie out, I think maybe Flashpoint, if I have it right, that was going to come out at the same time and be kind of serious. Now, apparently they were able to maneuver things to get that delayed somehow by threatening lawsuits. But as Kubrick was writing this, he wrote this with Terry Southern, and Peter George claims he actually wrote it more with him. Peter George is the author of the book Red Alert that the movie is based on.
Right.
Terry Southern kind of came in to punch it up. But as he was writing it, Kubrick began to realize this was a farce. He was like, the things that you would have to say seriously based on the truth sounded ridiculous. And the more he realized that, the more he realized we should play it as a farce so that the reality shines through even starker because of that.
Yeah, I'm looking at I guess the book was originally called The 2 Hours of Doom, and then was later called Red Alert or something. Anyway, I don't know why it's showing.
Fail Safe was the other novel.
Here it is. Originally published in the UK as 2 Hours of Doom.
2 Hours to Doom.
To Doom, sorry. 120-minute pour.
So it had an alternate UK title, kind of like Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone or Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone.
Right. Why didn't they just keep philosophers over here? What was the problem with that, do you think?
Because Americans don't understand philosophy.
You think that was it?
I don't know.
It annoys the crap out of me. Anyway, do you ever go back and like, just to dwell on this for a second, do you ever go back to like 1950s era, even science fiction or something, and read it? Like,
oh yeah, we just read Slan, which is I think 1946, 45, 46, for Sword and Laser.
How was it?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we've done it a couple of times, usually with science fiction, where we just go back and read something really old, and it's always weird because you can see why it's popular. Slan won a retro Hugo. A.E. Van Vogt was the author because of the concepts. Even now, hold out as interesting, but sometimes the writing's just not as good, and sometimes the writing is fine for the time, but would never be popular now. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get that. Like everyone always talks about Starship Troopers and how influential it is and whatever, but it's so old. It's like 50 something, and I always think if I'm going to check out a 1950 science fiction novel, it's going to have big bulbous alien heads and silly ships, and because we didn't know a lot of stuff yet about space, about Newtonian physics. Or
I love watching those old films where the rockets land vertically.
Yeah,
because they never did that. You don't land on the moon vertically.
Right.
Also, but now we do because the SpaceX stuff comes back and lands vertically.
Yeah. Like they didn't know any of those things, and they didn't know. You listen to the old radio plays, and it's just like X-1, Captain, we're on our way to Mars. We'll be there in 3 minutes, and it's like 3 minutes. What are you guys even doing? Like, like they just didn't know, and so I always get worried about that, and I wonder how a book like this would hold up now. Like it's so steeped in a very at the brink with the Soviet sort of mentality of war that I don't know how.
Well, that's a really good point, Scott, and it sort of brings me to my varying opinion on Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb.
Good.
I think I was in college. I think I was a sophomore in college when I saw this for the first time, and that would have been when I definitely know the Soviet Union existed when I saw this. Right. It was still a thing. It was led by Mikhail Gorbachev. Glasnost was happening. It was a more open Soviet Union. It was not as much of a threat, but the threat was still fresh in everyone's mind. And watching Dr. Strangelove was a revelation for me. I'm like, yes, no, this is amazing. Like, poking fun at the fact that we live with the idea of annihilating the planet and treat it as if it's an everyday occurrence. Like this is insane. This is ridiculous. And pointing up the ridiculousness of it is done brilliantly by Stanley Kubrick. I loved Dr. Strangelove. I owned it on videotape. That's how long ago it was. Watching it this weekend with the nuclear threat still active, but no Soviet Union. And the nuclear threat being more diffuse, not being there's two people in the world with their fingers on the button sort of situation.
Right.
I mean, even though there kind of are, but it's just, I don't know. It didn't feel relevant anymore. It felt like, no, the ridiculous part of our situation is not this stuff. We don't have two nations battling each other for direct military supremacy anymore. We have two nations cyber attacking each other, and we have two nations undermining each other economically if they can. And yes, nuclear war is just as much of a threat as it was back then, but it doesn't have the simplicity that this shows. I think that I'm sort of circling around to figure out what's different, because it's not that there isn't a threat, but the threat isn't, the get on the red phone, and if there's a misunderstanding, the launch might happen. Like, I think maybe because, from what I understand, we aren't minutes away from launch anymore. Launch might take a little longer, is part of it. and there's more players. You know, it's not just the Soviet Union and the United States. It's the United States and Russia and a few other ex-Soviet republics, and China and North Korea and Iran and Pakistan and India. Well, I say Iran. Iran wants to develop them. They don't actually have them. That was a mistake to include them in that company. But
sure.
But Pakistan and India have them. North Korea pretty much has them. Israel has them. So it's an entirely different world. I should not leave out France, the UK either.
You're right. There's plenty of nukes to go around, but also, but I take your point. They're not used as it's not the blunt instrument it used to feel like, of just like, you're going to get bombed and you're going to respond and then everyone's dead. These days it feels like it's, what did Carl Sagan say? Or someone saying they're going to reduce the number of matches they have in their matchbook doesn't change the fact that the room is coated in gas.
Right.
And there's no way to get around it and whatever. But these days it feels like it's used more as like almost like secondary pressure, and the real pressure is political.
As I try to wrap my head around it, I think the difference is that in the 90s, we did pull back from the brink. We got to exhale. You know, we did pull the missiles off of instant alert. We reduced the numbers out there. There was an actual pulling back, and the scientists who do the minutes to midnight, you know, they, for the first time, they had the clock more than 30 minutes from midnight. And we had a decade at least where we could take a sigh of relief and feel like the danger isn't gone, but it isn't every second of our lives. I really felt that growing up, like, wow, any second the whole world could be wiped out.
Yeah.
And it finally didn't feel that way in the 90s. And even though the danger has grown again since then, I don't think we've grown back to the point it was in the 60s yet. I think that's arguable possibly, but it certainly is a different feeling of the threat than it was back then.
Yeah, I feel the same exact way, that we were kids of the 80s were raised on a pretty steady diet of this, and there's no getting around it. Like, was it the same as all the duck and cover videos people got in the 50s and 60s? Probably not, but it was.
No, we got Threads and The Day After.
Yeah.
That was our 80s kid scare moments.
Oh my gosh, The Day After scared the crap out of me. So when I watch this, it just feels like a different world. And maybe it felt more relevant then because this was all, like you said, everything always felt like it was kind of at the brink. And these two superpowers are always pointing at each other and could go off any minute. And I don't feel that way now. So it just feels, I don't know, almost imaginary in a weird way. A thing of its time.
The Cuban Missile Crisis had just happened 2 years before this. And so very, very fresh in everyone's memory when Dr. Strangelove comes out is the idea that, like, wow, we almost did we almost did go to war.
Yeah. There are people, I assume there are people that think that this doomsday machine idea that's so prevalent in this film is based on some reality. Somebody somewhere's got something that's like worse than nukes that would just wipe us all out in a single button push.
It's kind of reminds me of a lot of the nuclear arms thought experiments. And it goes along with what you were saying about Carl Sagan, you know, matches in a gas-filled room.
Right.
It's sort of like, well, okay, you know, what if one side had this kind of weapon, and if it was triggered, it couldn't be undone, and then would it be worth having? You know, it reminds me of taking those kind of scenarios. I don't think there was ever anything that was created like that.
No, probably not.
I think we would know about that. You know, the government wouldn't tell you. That's something that would come out, especially if it did come out then. So,
it seems like if it didn't come out then, just knowing what we know now and knowing how we know how to like surveil things and like see things from satellites and everything else for that matter, I just feel like like some of the biggest.
Yeah, I don't think it's something you need to spend a lot of time worrying about.
I don't think it exists. But anyway, back to the merits of the film. I really don't know what to make of it. Like, so we've talked a little bit about relevance, but also I'm a huge fan of weird. Like, I like a weird movie that's sometimes just weird for the sake of being weird. It doesn't even have to have a point to it. And I couldn't tell if they were trying to do that here. Like, there are moments where Peter Sellers doing his thing with the glove and not being able to resist throwing a Hitler sign and all that is so farcical and so like slapstick and so not to be taken seriously. But then on the other hand, his president and the discussions that happen in the war room are portrayed in a way that seem like I'm supposed to take that stuff very seriously. And so I felt pulled around a bunch, like yanked around emotionally in this movie in a way that I don't know if
imagine if they had originally, if they'd ended the film how they originally meant to with a pie fight, how you would feel.
Wait a minute. You need to explain that. Hold on. There was supposed to be a pie fight and they didn't use it?
The original ending of the film depicted everyone in the war room involved in a pie fight.
Okay.
Kubrick decided it was too farcical, not consistent with the more satiric tone of the rest of the film.
Okay. I mean, okay. That's fine. I would have maybe liked to have
Alexander Walker said that cream pies were flying around so thickly you lost definition and couldn't say whom you were looking at.
Also, they filmed this. It was actually created.
And it was unusable because people were laughing too much.
I don't know. I think they made a mistake. They should have kept it in there because I kind of want to see it now.
I can see it both ways. One, it could have made it worse for you to be like, and now they're finishing with a pie fight? Like, this is ridiculous. On the other hand, maybe it would have helped you crystallize your opinions. Like, oh, okay, so most of it is allegory. Most of it is exaggeration.
Right.
It's not a real fight. It's a pie fight.
Hey, check it out. Pies at the end.
Or they're not taking their effect on the world seriously. To them, it's nuclear arms are just like a pie fight. Like, there's all kinds of ways you could go with that.
Does this footage exist? Do we know? Do we know if it's like out there?
Yeah. Good question. I don't actually know if that's like a DVD extra somewhere.
Strangelove pie.
Yeah.
Fight YouTube. Let's see if I can find it.
While you look for that, I do think there are moments of brilliance still that play, especially with the group captain and his interactions directly with the colonel who's going to cause this. I think that feels timeless. That sort of logic of, you don't understand that the ends justify the means, even if it means killing everyone on Earth. This will teach you. Like, that feels very relevant today. That feels like a lot of rhetoric we hear today. Like, we got to be tough. And if they won't let us be tough, we got to make them let us be tough. Like, I hear echoes of that all the time. So those scenes played very well with me. The Dr. Strangelove stuff, again, the distance of history mellows the effect of showing a scientist who's trying to hide the fact that he's an ex-Nazi, because that was very real in the United States in the 50s and 60s. Because there was the whole brain drain where the U.S. recruited scientists who had worked for Nazi Germany in order to use their expertise. And there was a lot of debate and a lot of disagreement over the ethics of that. And so it played very well back then. It doesn't seem, it means something different now, I think.
Yeah. Plus, by the way, I sent you a pie image in Discord if you want to take a look at it. But it strikes me that
delicious.
But look at that, George C. Scott all covered in pie cream and stuff. This is what you want. What was I going to say? I forgot what I was going to say. The pie thing really distracted me.
Yeah, sorry. I was just talking about the distance of the Nazi Germany.
That. Yeah, the idea of playing it up so that it seemed like anybody who may have been an ex-Nazi in the party or high up or even just a sympathizer would always be in this in this condition of just barely containing it.
Yeah.
Like they're just like, oh my gosh, I gotta let out my Nazism. I gotta put up the hand and do the thing. Is a really interesting concept that I'm not sure holds up or holds much water. Like, it's such a cartoon of what a Nazi might behave like in a post-war world. But what do I know?
I do really think there are elements of this movie that are probably back into being important today, in the sort of might is right throwback mentality. There's a lot of rhetoric out there that wants to harken back to this time period. Back in the 60s, we didn't take guff.
Right.
Back in the 50s, we did things right. Let's go back to those days. And this is those days. So I'm not sure if Dr. Strangelove still works today, because a lot of the illusions get lost and it's overly ridiculous in a way that I think at the time was more jarring than confusing.
Right.
These days we're so satirically sophisticated that maybe that's why sometimes it feels, I don't want to say dumb, but it feels a little weird because you're like, well, no, there's better ways to make that satirical point, because we've done so many of these now, but this was very new at the time. I mean, nobody had done a movie like this.
Yeah, it's very interesting. The one part that made me feel like they were never going to be serious was when Slim Pickens was riding on top of the nuke that they dropped, which is a famous scene. That's a big deal that he did it. And
at least it's motivated, though.
Yeah,
right? They build up his character throughout the film as somebody who's like, well, I don't like it, but I'm gonna do my duty.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's sitting on the bomb in that position for a good reason, trying to fix the doors when it accidentally lets him out. So the position he got in there wasn't just silly. It was like, oh, that's the position he'd be in, and being who he is, I guess he'd just give into the moment and be brave. That said, I agree with you. That even before I rewatched has always stuck out as kind of a silly moment.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to say it, ruin the movie or anything, but in my head, I have that as a totally different movie. There's an old silent film where a rocket lands on the eyeball of the moon. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah. From the Earth to the Moon.
There it is. I've never seen that either, by the way. I think that's on our list, actually. I'm not sure. But anyway,
check that.
I thought that was from that. I never thought I didn't know they were two different things.
That's a silent movie, though.
Yeah, no, I know, but
Slim Pickens ain't silent.
The only time I've ever seen Slim Pickens do this is it feels like I've seen him do it silently. It's hard to explain. Like it's only ever been in clips.
You probably
or pieces.
see it in documentaries or something where you're not sound up.
Yes.
They're just showing it while they're doing voiceover or something. That's probably why.
Yeah, even at our local theater, they'll do like what do you call them? Like a montage of movies from ancient to current and a big mix of them. And this is in there where he's jumping out of the plane, but they have music playing. And so to me, that's just like, oh, there's that one weird silent film with the thing. And so when I finally saw
Earth to the Moon is not in our list.
Yeah, was it really? Oh, man. I feel like that's something we should see. But anyway, that whole part to me is just so unreal and so ridiculous. He's just cowboy riding that thing down into oblivion. I didn't know. I had to check out. Like I just had to say, all right, well, I can't. None of this movie can be taken that seriously.
Again, I go back to the fact that it all was a logical outcome of believable things that led to that silly, silly moment. Whereas Dr. Strangelove, there's no reason why he acts that way. We're never given a backstory other than he is a former Nazi. That like why does he in a wheelchair? Why does his hand have a mind of its own? Like it's just that's just pure silliness.
Right. I guess I was bothered by the physics, and that's dumb, and I shouldn't do that.
Oh yeah, he wouldn't be able to stay on there.
No, right. And be all like wee-haw and waving his hat and holding on with one hand, and I mean, in pure farcical fashion, it's fine. But in a movie that wants me to alternately take it seriously and then not, or to, throw up my hands because it's kind of ridiculous, it was jarring, and I'll get over it. But it was just a weird thing. Performances-wise, I thought everybody kind of across the board was really good in this. I think George C. Scott is really good in this.
Yeah,
and
it's like what 6 years before Patton.
Is that all?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, he aged a lot, or they made him look older.
Well, they also aged it for the movie.
Yeah, they probably did. I haven't seen Patton in ages, but I remember thinking he was just so good in it, and he was an amazing actor, and he was great in this. Peter Sellers was great in this. The guy that played the loony bin general that lost his mind and was worried about everyone's bodily fluids. And essences. He was good, but I still didn't quite grasp what his point was. And
I think he is actually one of the more understandable characters for me. He is the emblem of the ideologue in a position of influence, right? So he's not accountable like the president. Nobody knows he's there. And so his weird ideology can kind of go under the radar. And because he's in a position of power, he can take control of these things that no one should have control of because they can destroy the earth. So that to me is pretty straightforward. Like, if you have these things available, eventually someone with a quirky ideology will use them for their own purposes, seems to be the message.
Yeah. And I don't know, I bought him like hook, line, and sinker. I like the idea of a crazy CO kind of losing his mind. In fact, there's some parallels here.
That's Sterling Hayden, man. Sterling Hayden is good.
Oh, he's great. But this has real parallels for me to a movie I really enjoyed in like 1993-ish. I can't remember when it came out, but Crimson Tide with Gene Hackman and Denzel Washington was this story that's told in a very modern sensibility, kind of Jerry Bruckheimer. Well, he's literally the producer on it, so a Jerry Bruckheimer movie. Ridley Scott's brother, Tony Scott, made the movie. He also made Top Gun and a bunch of other stuff like that. So you kind of know what you're getting into, but the storyline was very similar to this in two ways. One was a message that comes to the sub that tells the sub we're now at war and you are to launch the nuclear, you're to use the codes and go. And on the one hand, you got Denzel saying, no, we can't do it. We don't know. We need confirmation. And you have this other guy who's like a little bit nuts. He has a pet dog, and he's kind of freaking out. Gene Hackman saying, no, we have to. We have to do it no matter what. So there's that whole conflict. And then at the same time, you kind of have just similar themes. And it made me wonder, like, did Crimson Tide lift a little Doctor Strangelove?
Well, but Red Alert and Failsafe and Crimson Tide and Hunt for Red October, like, there's so, like, this is I don't know which one does this story first, but the idea of, hey, you know, somebody could get the order to do this and not be sure it's real. And what if it wasn't real? Or what if it was a mistake? And how would people react if they actually had to do it? Like, that goes back to the invention of nuclear arms. Like, people started thinking of those stories right away. So I don't know that you could say Dr. Strangelove even invented that particular conceit.
Yeah, it's a fun conceit though. Gets the tension ratcheted right up.
Fun. Yeah, the destruction of the planet.
Yeah, the idea that they've got, like, you know, these rules and they've got to live by. They got to do the rules. You know, Slim Pickens has to do the thing.
Right.
Boy, there's
and the Army came out at the time. The Pentagon at the time of the Doctor Strangelove announced that, and I think they do a pre-roll on the movie. They where it says the Army has got safeguards that won't let this happen. Yeah. Just so you know.
Yeah, which was good to see. I was happy to hear that was not actually possible, and they did make a big deal out of it at the top of the top of the movie in the credits.
Yeah.
Really weird credit sequence. Just to throw this out real quick. So they had the whole disclaimer at the beginning, a little bit of narration like I played at the top of the show, and then they had the strangest hand-drawn credits I have seen in a movie in a really long time.
Yeah, very hip 60s credits.
Yeah, very odd. Yeah. Didn't expect that, but was glad, I guess, that I got to see that because I didn't expect that in a movie like this. Part of me is saying, dude, Stanley Kubrick always knows what he's doing. He's always kind of jacking you around. It's always supposed to make you go, wait a minute, did he mean to say that? Was that supposed to happen here? Why did that feel shocking even though it's not? Like, all of that stuff is his signature. So when I go into one of his movies, even his oldest stuff, all bets are off. It's like I'm getting yanked around, and I should just acknowledge it, accept it, embrace it, and be prepared to, you know, deal with it.
And it is kind of a dividing line for him too. It's the first of his movies that really is Kubrick, because prior to Doctor Strangelove was Lolita, Spartacus, Paths of Glory, The Killing. Those are movies that fans know it's Kubrick, but the general audience just like, oh, right, Spartacus, that old movie from the 60s. When you go after Doctor Strangelove, it's 2001: A Space Odyssey, A Clockwork Orange, The Shining, Full Metal Jacket. Those are movies that even general fans like, oh, those are Kubrick movies, right?
Yeah.
Like, it really is a dividing line in his career.
Yeah, I hadn't really realized it before until now, but it absolutely is. And it was like that time where he was kind of going from, I'm sort of traditional and average filmmaker guy to,
I can make a blockbuster.
I'm going to go weird. You know, like the weird was about to hit us. There's an interesting thing in the chat just posted by Doc Medpot, who says in 1995, Kubrick enlisted Terry Southern to script a sequel titled Son of Strangelove.
Right.
Kubrick had Terry Gilliam in mind to direct, and I thought this movie had a very Terry Gilliam quality to it. So that would make sense to me. Anyway, the script was never completed. The index cards laying around the story's basic structure were found among Southern's papers after he died in October of '95. It was set largely in an underground bunker or in bunkers where Dr. Strangelove had been taken refugee with a group of women. What an odd... Well, I mean, can I assume that
Gilliam says he never was approached, and he would have loved to do it.
Yeah. You could totally see him doing it too, right?
Yeah.
But
by the way, clarification too. The reason Peter Sellers was asked to play 4 major roles was the studio thought the success of Lolita stemmed from the fact that Sellers had a number of identities, even though it was one character. So they wanted the next movie to have Sellers have 4 roles because they thought that would make it a success.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever. Studios do all kinds of things to ensure bottom line, but that's an odd one.
We must not allow a Sellers gap. We must have all the Sellers that the other studios have.
That's right. What else here? I was going to say something, and then I forgot about that, too. My brain doesn't work today. I always like to ask this every time we do one of these. Do you think Dr. Strangelove could be remade?
I'm going to say no on this one.
Yeah.
I think to remake Dr. Strangelove with a modern sensibility and with a relevance to the current situation on planet Earth would require a different movie. Like, I just don't think it's Dr. Strangelove anymore. Because at a certain point, you have to okay, so we're going to set it in modern times. Okay, and we're going to set it with the modern threat with multiple nuclear powers. So we're going to have more players on the stage. And it's, having a former Nazi is just not going to play if it's in modern. Like, if you made a beat for beat 1964 set version, then why bother? I just don't think that,
because it already exists. It's already here.
Yeah. It's already there, and you're not going to improve on it.
Yeah.
Because other movies like Failsafe and others, can tell it in a more serious way. So the only way forward, in my opinion, is to try to make it modern. And as soon as you make it modern, it's not Dr. Strangelove anymore, because it's an entirely different problem you're addressing.
Yeah. Even down to the dumb riding the rocket thing would just be, all right, great. That looks good in CG, I guess. Like, you're missing the point at that. If you start doing that, you're missing the entire point. So yeah, I don't think this is one you try to remake. I wouldn't mind like a weird offshoot take on it, like somebody make a short animated thing.
Maybe a sequel.
Maybe a sequel,
like
a follow-up.
Like maybe you have Dr. Strangelove's granddaughter, who like advocates for peace and disarmament, and you just tell a whole different story. It's like doing a heist movie or like a techno thriller today without having cell phones in them. Like I just feel like it's out of time. It's just can't. We're done. It's 63 was a long time ago. It's perfect for when it was. It holds up in a lot of weird ways now. In some ways it doesn't. But don't go trying to make that again. Somebody out there. Did Kubrick have any kids that are now like auteurs or anything? Probably not. Seems like the kind of guy that wouldn't. I don't want to say one way or the other because I don't know, but that'd be interesting. Larry Kubrick steps forward and says, I'll take my dad's cool sequel script and I'll get Terry Gilliam to make it with me. Probably not. Yeah, I'm trying to find under personal life, it just says death. Yeah, that's all he was. Make movies and die. That's it. I mean, he had relationships, multiple relationships, apparently. But yeah, well, he's a sexy guy with a cool mustache. I think that'll do it for nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. I think that's going to do it for this week's. Now, if you have thoughts and feelings about this movie, I know there are people who consider it the greatest film ever because I've heard from some of you on Twitter this week, and all of you have been worried about what we think. I'd love to get some of your feedback that we can read on a future show about how do you feel about it today. Did you watch it again today? What'd you think? And I hope you take our criticisms in the spirit in which they're intended, which is not to say this is a bad movie. It shouldn't be on the list. I think it absolutely deserves to be on the list. I think maybe if you want to criticize our episode, you can criticize us for giving short shrift to the cinematography, to the acting, to the story construction, and to the relevance in its time.
Sure.
It is a fantastic movie. I got distracted in saying, well, we all know it's fantastic. Let's talk about how well it holds up today, and that's where I went.
Did it always have this "How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb" subtitle?
Yes, that is the name of Dr. Strangelove.
Okay, so yeah, that's the part that makes me think it's supposed to all be farce, and I'm not supposed to take anything seriously because it's kind of a farcical
name. Yeah, there
name.
were multiple names too. They toyed around with different names for it, like How I Started World War III and that sort of thing.
Chat room has a suggestion: should watch the documentary called Stanley Kubrick's Boxes. Very interesting look at how obsessed he got with his own films. I find him utterly fascinating. The one that's about...
Oh, here's one of the best ones. Dr. Strangelove's Secret Uses of Uranus. The planet.
Oh. Okay, because I assumed he meant people's buttholes, is what I thought he meant.
Yeah, no, it's spelled Uranus.
Uranus. You're saying you are an anus. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm spelling the planet's name.
Oh, got it. Okay. Actually, I am going to check that documentary out. Thank you, Sector 7, for the recommendation. Next month, which will be...
Sidian says he had 2 children by his last wife, Christiane, and Sector 7 says he met Christiane during the filming of Paths of Glory.
Okay, so maybe there is some, I don't know what they're doing
some
now.
Directorial blood out there.
Maybe they're just chilling. Maybe they don't care. They don't have to be like Dad, and that's okay, too. You do your own thing. You be you. We're going to be us, and that means that next week, normal episode, but in a month from today or so, we will do another film in the Film Festival of Current Geek. What are we planning on next, Tom?
Next month, we go back to Hitchcock again.
Whoa, third time.
Yeah.
North
by Northwest. A
lot
lot of Hitchcock in the top movie lists out there, and this one is North by Northwest, starring Cary Grant from 1959.
Never seen this movie. That's my Cary Grant. It's as good as it gets.
It's not bad. I actually knew what you were doing.
Did you?
Before you said it was
really?
Cary Grant.
Really? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So tell your friends, everybody.
Judy. He never said Judy.
I know, he never did, right? It's one of those Mandela effect things. Anyway, that's next month. That's North by Northwest. I have never seen it. I have no idea what to expect. So very excited. 1959, which is weird to think is only 3 or 4 years before Dr. Strangelove.
But it's in color.
It's in color. You're right. So weird. I mean, Strangelove was obviously on purpose in black and white. They were aiming for something there. Tonally, and they nailed it, I guess. But Hitchcock, he's back. Third film in. We'll get to that. Hang around for the rest of the show because at the very end here, we have Legal Geek once again swooping in, this time covering Amazon's reviews leading to FTC penalties and a look against the case against Armoflange products recently brought up by the Federal Trade Commission to stop biased online reviews. Yeah. Was it Aromaflage?
I don't know about flage, but it's aroma for sure.
I don't like it. It smells funny. To get my drift.
Doesn't pass the smell test, does it?
Doesn't. If you want to support this show, there's a simple and easy way to do it. You just get on a web browser on your phone or on your desktop or wherever you want to do it and go to patreon.com/currentgeek and support this show. If you do, it's great for us and it really helps us. Thanks to everyone who does. And an encouragement out to all of you who are just saying, do I have $1? You do. You have $1. Toss $1 our way. Tom Merritt, before we go, is there anything else you'd like to say?
Yes, there is. If you like hearing Scott Johnson talk, there are more ways to hear Scott Johnson talk in the Daily Tech News Show universe. Monthly video games briefing from Scott Johnson and Patrick Beja targets the people who are tired of the hardcore gamers getting all the love. There's nothing wrong with a show about hardcore gaming, but what about you, the medium core gamer, who just wants to get the information you need every month to understand the gaming world? That's what the monthly video game briefing is for. Check it out at dailytechnewsshow.com/MVGB.
I agree 100% on that. It's a great show. I'm really enjoying it. Patrick and I love it. And if you want more video games in your life, it's a great place to check that out. CurrentGeek.com is our website. You can find that and all other links from there. So if you're looking for our Twitter accounts, email accounts, all that stuff, look no further than CurrentGeek.com. That's going to do it for us. For me, for Tom, and for all of you beautiful people, especially those that showed up live tonight. Thank you all for being here. We'll be back next week with more. Until then, take care. Oh, it says perfect. Well done.